We hope you enjoyed this fabulous short film program. In a moment, we will be welcoming the filmmaker of Night Session, Ballard C. Boyd, in conversation with short film curator Warren Etheredge. Thank you for joining us at the Seattle Jewish Film Festival, now in its 31st year of presenting extraordinary Jewish cinema in the Pacific Northwest. My name is Dustin Kaspar. I'm the programming coordinator with the SJFF. Now in my first year of involvement with the festival. This year at the Seattle Jewish Film Festival, we are presenting 30 films, including these 6 you just saw, and they've been built around the thematic foundation of roots and reels. Our curated films orbit around the exploration of how rootedness in family, faith, tradition, culture, and community has the power to sustain us in trying times. And that is especially true of the films in It Takes a Shtetl, this program. Each story takes a different angle around relying on our shared community and sometimes total strangers who open new opportunities to resolve challenges in our lives. Nowhere is that surprising influence of an outsider more present than in Ballard C. Boyd's Night Session, which was the first film that you saw in this program. Ballard C. Boyd is a 2-time Emmy and Peabody award-winning director and producer who is currently producing and segment directing at The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. His work includes short films, commercials, and music videos, and he is in post-production on his first feature film. And if we're nice to him, perhaps he'll pull out his ukulele and play us a song. He is joined by Warren Etheredge, the Seattle Jewish Film Festival's longtime partner in short films and champion of short films the world over. He is a true supporter of the art of storytelling, teaching, interviewing, and screenwriting, producing short and feature films, and hosting over 35 interviews across his career. Warren is also the co-founder and curator of the Walla Walla Movie Crush. I'm delighted to welcome Ballard C. Boyd and Warren Etheredge in conversation. Take it away, friends.
Thank you, Dustin. Welcome, Ballard. Good to see you here.
Hello. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having our short. It means a lot. We're very honored.
Night Session is a wonderful short, and I can spill the tea and say that, yes, I have programmed Night Session before at another festival and was so happy to get a chance to showcase it here at the Seattle Jewish Film Festival because it really was what led to my concept of It Takes a Shtetl, because it really does take a community. But I want to start elsewhere, Ballard, if I may.
Sure.
As far as I can tell, you are the Steven Soderbergh of comedy. In that
He's made comedies too, so don't tell him that.
You serve as your own cinematographer and editor without the aliases.
Yes, yeah. I wore a lot of hats on this short. If I did it again, I would probably wear one less hat. Some of that was out of necessity. So there's no. It was mentioned in the bio thing. So my day job is I direct sketches and produce for the Late Show Stephen Colbert. I wear a lot of those same hats in that I direct for the show, but I'm also my own DP and editor for a lot of the sketches there. And for this short, I was not originally planning to DP it, but then my very good friend that I wanted to shoot it happened to be like wrapping a feature right when we were shooting this, and I was like, I'm going to shoot this too. So this was definitely I co-wrote it and directed it and shot it and edited it and did some other behind-the-scenes stuff.
So I have some history in late night, and I understand that pace,
Sure.
and that pattern and stuff like that. And even the way you're speaking right now, it seems like you're on deadline somehow.
That's just me too. I'm just cranked, I guess.
And it's New York. It's fine.
Also true. Also New York.
But I'm curious because sometimes in late night there's that idea that nothing's ever perfect, as you've talked about. Like it's just 5:30, it has to be done. But with making a short like this rather than for the show, did you feel that same sort of urgency, like keep going?
I do think I can speak for myself. I like I came up kind of in a lot of my career has been in short form content, but a lot of it's been comedic. So I came up directing sketch comedy in the early days of YouTube, and then I directed commercials for a run of years, and then being in late night now, I've been with the Late Show Stephen Colbert since it started. So we're in season 11, which is pretty bonkers. And I like making a thing and finishing a thing, and then like finishing it and turning on to another thing. So like that pace has just suited me a lot in working in short form. I am lucky that I am not a perfectionist. I'm a completionist. I need it done more than I need it perfect. But yeah, for a short, and it was mentioned in the intro that I've got a feature that I've been posting. It's been nice to have the elbow room, that it doesn't have to be really fast. But there also there hits a limit, especially when putting something together where you're like, I'm ready to wrap it up. This particular short was something that I wrote with a friend of mine, a great, really funny writer and performer named David Bizzarro. The genesis of this was I had a daughter in 2020. And I got parental leave from my show, but we only used half of it, my wife and I, because we didn't really know what the future was going to look like. It was the pandemic. And then around the 1 year mark of our child being born, my TV show reminded me that if I don't use any remaining parental leave by 1 year mark, I'm going to lose it. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll see you guys at the end of the summer. I'm going to take leave right now. But I know enough of myself that, like, if I'm not working on some creative project, I just get antsy. Like, I just like making stuff, which is why, like, short form is kind of nice because there's always a new challenge and I finish it and then I make another thing. And so I went to not a bunch, but several friends basically being like, does anybody have an idea for a short? Maybe you want to write something? And so David and I were brainstorming about some possible ideas for shorts, and he had mentioned one idea that involved a therapist. I think he had been doing some acting training and had been working on like a therapist kind of character, and we had that as a premise. And then he pitched me another kind of idea that involved a burglar, but it went in a totally different route. And then we just kind of ended up very quickly smooshing them together and realizing, like, we like the idea of a burglar, again, as a premise. You've seen the short, I'm talking about this, but just the idea that someone the rules doing the opposite of what you had expected, and that's obviously like there's good comedy premise in contrast. You know, if somebody's behaving badly or behaving incorrectly is like obviously a great comedic premise for anything. And the idea of that morphing into a therapy session was just a really good comedic engine. And then from there, the idea that like we came up with the beats from there of the big turns in the storyline pretty quickly. Like the idea like, oh, he used to be a therapist, then it turns more actively into a therapist session. Then the cop showing up. It really was like, if we took this premise and extrapolated it out, what would be the most logical ways it could go further off the rails? So like having cop show, well, what happened? Okay, then they get involved with it. Then it gets wrapped up. He has this catharsis. That was kind of the engine for this of can we make something with a comedy, very high concept comedy premise, but that is secretly really more emotional and really a story about grief and mourning a relationship and shared connection of people that wouldn't have any reason to connect with each other. And then having the final escalation of like, oh yeah, no, they still have to arrest him and they have to kind of work that out. So we had kind of those kind of like maybe 4-act turns, even an 11-minute short. Those the bones of like that comedic arc and escalations was really fast. But then knowing that like, okay, then within the meat of those kind of turns, they're actually having this conversation about his relationship and how does the burglar slowly peel the onion and have this guy come to realizations and then back off and then be pushed a little bit further and then fight it and then eventually release. That took like 3 weeks to kind of structure the actual conversation itself. It felt like a long time to kind of like crack that.
That was like the most amazing, like 2-minute masterclass in sketch comedy you could give anybody. So thank you so much for that. I will use it in my class next quarter.
I was going to say, to simplify even part of that, we talk a lot in comedy of like heighten and tighten, which is the idea of that like you need to constantly raise the stakes of a premise. Like if you introduce a joke to an audience and then you're going to do the same joke, they're bored, they know that joke. So it has to be some escalation on that joke. And then also the tighten thing, that it gets a little faster as it progresses. So like that kind of first chunk introducing the premise takes a little bit longer than once he's a therapist and then getting to the cops and then getting to the cops' realization and then they have to arrest him. That each one of those takes a little bit faster, so it kind of accelerates.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm curious because you've worked in comedy for a while, like, you know, you back in Emerson and were filming sketch comedy, doing stuff on YouTube, things like that. And I've read you talk about essentially this idea of comedy being a Trojan horse to get these other things in. Sketch isn't always that. Sometimes sketch is absurdist. Sometimes sketch is like just a simple joke. What is this drive to have this emotional core for you?
I think that's, for me, I've been kind of figuring out, like, that's my jam. I will always probably do something with some comedic side to it. The sense I wouldn't do something that would be solely dramatic, but if it had no sense of humor to it, I would simply be bored. That's my personal taste. But I like comedy a lot, so I love the idea of I like things that have really clear premises to them, because I think that's fun of telling the audience, like, okay, here are the walls and parameters of this idea, and we're going to play within the sandbox. But sometimes you actually get a lot of creativity from those constraints. And then within that, I do like the idea of that. I've realized some of my big things. I like really hyper committing to whatever the concept of the thing is, whether it's a comedic premise or the feature film that we have is a comedy, but also is a mystery thriller about someone who goes missing. So that has like its own genre conventions to it. And then there is something really fun about then having it lead to something that is very, very earnest and emotional and vulnerable and finding connections. Like that interpersonal side of things is just like what I've found now creatively in my career to be the most fun for me. I've been working so much in short form and comedy for so long, and I will always love it. Like I love having an idea and extrapolating out to the nth degree of a premise. But I think there's something now really fun about relationships. You know, people for a long time I feel like I was even told that like, oh, stories about character, and I kind of feel like now stories about relationships. If you just watch somebody do something in a vacuum, it's not as interesting. And I really feel like that connection between people is what was that just lights me up. So this was something like that. I've found also in like things that I've written over time that have been for me or slightly longer narrative stuff. I now know I'm like kind of obsessed with finding shared connection between people that otherwise wouldn't have a connection or may even be at odds with each other.
So I'm curious because you talked about this partnership with David Bizzaro and having like the two ideas and melding them. And David's background is in production on Sesame Street, I believe.
Yeah, he's been if Mike get the terms, like he's been a puppet wrangler and a puppet builder for Sesame, and then also is a performer with the Muppets. He worked on the most recent the Muppet Show special.
Wow. And so when you got these ideas from him, which is, I have so many questions about that, but when you got these ideas from him, were you bringing the emotion to it? Were you bringing the relationships to it? Did you find that concept of the homeowner and the burglar and how they're tied?
I don't entirely remember. I attribute a ton to David because this would not exist without his without these ideas and kind of running with it. There definitely get some things where you're bouncing stuff off each other, and you don't always remember the genesis of who came up with what joke or premise and things like that. But I know that like this. He definitely was the one who brought these two ideas to the table, and sometimes it's finding those connections, and then be like, well, what about this? And then you start bouncing ideas off each other, and I think we sent an outline back and forth a couple of times. So I think he was working on, if not right then in part of the conversation, he was working on the Muppet Mayhem, I think is the name of the show. This is a Dr. Teeth and Electric Mayhem show that they did on Disney Plus. And so he was like in production, as I remember, and so we were sending ideas kind of back and forth in an outline to kind of build the beat sheet for how the thing was structured. And then I took that and then did the pass on actually like writing the dialogue and building the whole structure of the conversation.
So when we have the idea and we have to talk about casting, we have to talk about Richard Kind. Did you have him in mind going in?
So I'll say yeah. I'm a huge Richard Kind fan, as everyone should be, because he's great. We got incredibly lucky. This was totally one of those like Hail Mary passes. You write something with somebody in mind. They don't have a reason. They don't necessarily have to do this thing. There's not a huge incentive out of it. And I'll even say this: what happened was that we wrote this script. I think summer. I'm trying to think exactly what summer it was. If I might get the math wrong. I think it might have been 2022 or 2021. I think we wrote it, and then I think I sat on it because I was like trying to find something to like scratch an itch while I was going to be on leave, and then I ended up actually actively coming back to Colbert to like do a sketch in the middle of my leave and then going back on leave, and that was just enough of like a big a piece that I got to work on that was really fun. I was like, oh, that scratched my creative itch for a few months, and so we just kind of had this script sitting around, and I had been trying to get this feature film off the ground, and we had hit a couple of bumps, and that kind of got frozen, and I was a little demoralized on that, and I was like, I have this script with the burglar thing that's been sitting around. Why don't we just send it to Richard and see if he's up for doing it? I feel like I just need to make a thing, because we had just kind of put it on ice for a little while. And if he hadn't said yes to it, there was somebody else that I was thinking about like going out to. So we're like, maybe we have a route to make a thing. And then, so we reached out to him, and I had met him and worked with him one other time in 2016 at the Democratic National Convention. Colbert was doing live shows. That was like our first year in production, and there was a few of us that were embedded in Philadelphia, like doing. I think that was Philly. It's been a while. Doing content, and so we did a fake kind of behind the scenes mockumentary with Richard, but only for like an hour and a half. We shoot really fast, and so the bit was that like that year was Hillary and Bernie Sanders up for the nomination, and not really sure how the delegates were going to vote for, but technically there was another candidate, Martin O'Malley, who had not dropped out of the race. And the idea that Richard Kind was the only Martin O'Malley supporter at the DNC, and it was just him trying to like drum up ground root support, but still kind of he's playing himself. He is still actively Richard Kind, but also playing like the sad sack that nobody will back him, but he's just like very desperately, he's just committed to it. We got Martin O'Malley to reprise, like to actually show up as a cameo and tell him, be like, Richard, we've talked about this. It's time to move on. And he was great and lovely and just a joy to work with, and really, really funny. And it was written by this great comedian Cullen Crawford, who I'll plug a thing of Cullen just did. He just created a animated show on Netflix called Strip Law that just released this past Friday. And it's great. And he is so funny. He's one of the funniest writers I know. I've missed working with him, but I got to do this Richard Kind thing with him. We jumping back, we had the script, we sent it to Richard Kind's people. I don't have like a direct line to him, so we reached out to his managers and basically just like, hey, we have this thing, here's the background. I'm a huge fan of his work. We know he's really, really funny. I think I wrote him a little letter. I was like, hey, I'm a huge fan of your work as a comedian. He also did this short film called Black Swell that was kind of I don't know if you've seen it. It made a run on the festival circuit where there's not a single joke in it, and it starts with him playing character in a hotel room about to commit suicide, and it goes from there. And he's just so good at it. Like, we know him as a comedic actor, but he has so much pathos and weight and sadness, and that was my pitch for this movie. I was like, hey, you wrote this thing. It's a really funny premise. I'm a huge fan. I know you're really funny. I saw you in this short doing Black Swell not being funny, and that's what I'm looking for this character. Somebody that can be really funny and know how to just deliver a joke, but then it comes to a place of this completely genuine vulnerability for this character. And you mentioned like Trojan horse. I ran across this phrase recently in an interview with Gore Verbinski, and he used the phrase, you can hide some medicine in the cake. And I like that description a lot. That you can if you can get people laughing, you can sometimes and sneak them with entertainment. Then you can surprise them with way more earnest emotions that they may not be like. Otherwise, they might be like, I don't want to sit around that. And but like you can kind of peel that and lull people in. And that was the kind of surprise that was fun for the piece. Like, it's a very, very silly premise, and yet you watch this character kind of just in a close up in a you shoot a bunch of coverage, and then we get into Richard's close up, and I was like, I think there's one cut simply because I had to like switch takes, one cutaway when he has this catharsis, but I was like, just stay in his face. This is great. His performance is great. He's remarkable, and I think he made like 2 or 3 takes. He's incredible. So it was a joy to work with him.
Richard Kind is, to me, forget Tom Hanks. He's the everyman. He's America's everyman now.
He's great. I will also say he's America's greatest sad sack. He's the current greatest living sad sack. But also a really good blowhard. Like he's magnificent.
So, but another thing about Richard Kind, though, is he's committed to public transport, yes,
and I can verify that. Yeah. I can verify that, right? Yeah. We basically offered to like get him a car. So yeah, he did not need to do the short, but he liked the script. And then I discovered once we started kind of like chatting about it that he did not remember me at all. He had no memory at all of the DNC. He thought I was a writer. I don't think he even read the letter I got. I think he just read the script. We started talking about the project, and he thought it was a writer. It was going to be my first thing was a director. I was like, no, I'm a director. It's the other way around. And then he even commented, it was like, yeah, I did one thing for Colbert, but it didn't really air. But I did this one thing at DNC, and that was really good. I was like, oh, I was the one who made that. He's like, oh, you were? And like, I think I kind of won him over retroactively on that. But you mentioned the mass transit. He's a legit actor, and luckily we're shooting in New York, and he lives not that far from where we were shooting. And so we were like, we'll get him a car. And he's like, no, I'll get this. I'll take the bus. And so he was just taking the bus from the Upper West Side down to where we were in Midtown. And there happened that day, we shot 2 days. We shot a Saturday and a Sunday. And there was a severe thunderstorm right when he was arriving. And his bus got stuck, and then he had to like get out and walk and get in a bus. So he showed up, the very first day of our shoot, he showed up an hour late, completely drenched, and like all so apologetic. And luckily, like we were well buttoned up. He's really good. we rocked. He was great. We had the time, and we made it up. And I'm proud to say that, like, it's 11-minute short, but it's basically two people in a room. We wrote it, and then like accidentally we're like, oh, whoops, we wrote a one-act play. But it's a lot of dialogue, and to make it interesting, we had a lot of blocking. It's two people sitting around talking, so having them move through the space and be in the process of robbing his apartment while having this conversation kind of is what made it visually interesting. But it was 16 pages of dialogue for an 11-minute short, so we were still shooting 8 pages of dialogue a day. And their blocking was such a way that we'd be like, great, we're going to shoot like 3 pages of the conversation from like here to this point, and then we're going to stop and reset it. And the other thing, just to kind of share, that I find the behind the scenes, like how do you put it together, is that it's all set at nighttime. Rich was the one who was like, if there's any way that we can not shoot this all the way overnight, everything's better. But crew's better, performances are better, and he was like, if there's any way you can talk to your DP to figure out like what are the angles and the lights and stuff like that. And of course, I was like, then it becomes like, I'm the DP, so I'm going to figure it out. So we shot it in what's called like splits. So we basically we shot it starting at like 1 or 2 p.m. and then lunch was at dusk. And then we shot again at nighttime, and we could just kind of arrange it so that you knew all the angles going in, so that if you weren't seeing directly towards a window or like towards the back of the apartment, which had some weird windows like there where we knew it needed to be night, we blacked out everything, and you'd shoot all the angles that you could until you hit lunchtime, and then you strip off all the blacking and shoot other ways. And so yeah, there'll be moments where they'll have a conversation, and we're shooting the reverse 6 hours later, because now we're seeing out those windows, and you kind of have to piece it. So it's a little bit of a Tetris problem, but that's like filmmaking.
I love that, and I have a question that follows up on that, but I want to get back to casting for just 1 second, because Richard Kind, national treasure, but your other character is key, and Joe Miles does a fantastic job in that role. Was that an open audition situation, or did you know?
Joe's someone I've known for more than 10 years, and was somebody that just came to mind with some of the line reads. Joe's kind of remarkable. He's a great guy. He's really funny. He's really dry, but it was nice that there were lines that were kind of just innocuous lines that because I've known him so long, I had part of his voice in my head. So I was like, oh, for this innocuous line read, I know what he's probably going to sound like, and it's still going to be funny. And that was kind of nice. And then the other 2 actors, the cops, are friends, Christiana Lopez and David Ebert. Christiana I've known also for not as long as Joe, but I'm trying to think how many years now. Going on 7 years, maybe 8 years, something like that. And she's also like an incredibly funny performer. She's a director and a writer, and so it was good to bring on somebody else that knows the process that I could kind of lean on and trust. And then David Ebert, who played the other cop, the male cop, is somebody that I found because he did this completely bonkers short, I think called It's Been Too Long, with his wife. There was a South by Southwest short that was just such a bonkers performance. I don't know how I ran across it, but I ran across the internet, and I thought, this is so weird, and who is this guy? And I started following him on Instagram, and he followed me back as just like a rando person. And we both kind of just ended up commenting on like, oh, hey, that was really cool that you did. And he is still a comedy actor, but also directs a lot of commercials. That's kind of his bread and butter these days. So we bonded over talking about commercial work, or directing, I should say. And I had just been looking for something to work with him on. And so when this came around, he was also somebody that I thought of, like, oh, that would be fun to have this as an opportunity to work with David Ebert. And it just so happened, in a wonderful coincidence, that Richard Kind is his favorite actor of all time. As you talk about, like, people say like Tom Hanks is like America's everyman. Ebert has talked about how, like, when he was in high school and people were like, yeah, Brad Pitt's really good. He's like, yeah, but have you seen Richard Kind? Like, he was just so in on how good he is, and so it was lucky. He was pretty thrilled to be able to like play opposite him. And David plays such a perfect, just like goofball, like just dumb.
He nailed it, certainly. I mean, comedies, I worked in the comedy world in New York, and I love the community of that. The title of this program is It Takes a Shtetl. It's about community. I'm curious about your community of fellow comedic filmmakers and actors, and also the community of the Colbert Show, of late night, because that's 200 people. Is this something that you thrive on? You're not a lone wolf?
I'm not a lone wolf. I wear a lot of hats, but the thing about filmmaking is it is a team sport. Unless I'm the only one acting or I don't have actors and I'm just holding a camera, it is very much a team sport. Anybody who thinks that like they're the it's such a weird thing. We talk about like the auteur theorist, like someone's the author of the process. It's like it does belong impartial to everybody because that's just the nature of how this works. Yeah, and I'm somebody that like I was an only child growing up, and I do get along pretty well by myself. But there hits a limit where you're like, no, we're social animals. We have to be around people because that's how we connect. And I know, like, I mean, I mentioned this, like, I'm kind of obsessed with the idea of how people find connection and friendship and like shared spaces out of, especially when they shouldn't be interacting together. Like that I'm just kind of fascinated by that. Like in the feature that we're in post on is about, it's called Jackrabbit. It's about two women who hate each other but share a best friend, who initially start competing over the friendship until the friend vanishes. And so now they're forced to team up to figure out what happened to her, and in the process discover that her disappearance is just the first of a whole bunch of secrets. So it's really fun. It's one part Odd Couple comedy and then one part thriller. But the origins of that was I wanted to write a story around two women who were enemies who became friends. So like the genre trappings of it is fun for me because like I like genre movies, I like high concept premises, I love mysteries. It took a really long time to break it because I take that part seriously. But the origins for it, and also I think in the long run, why you give a shit is because of these relationships. That's who you're going to fall in love with and really root for. And so that was really fun to build a longer story of something where you can really show it over time. So much of my work has been short form, and even this is a short film, but it's different. So much of my career has been like, 30 seconds to 3 minutes, and to do something that's even 11 minutes and still have what feels like a full arc and like, 4 changes in several twists to it, was really fun and satisfying. And now it was really fun last year to do it on like an even larger scale.
I can't wait to see it. Well, festival circuit and then theatrical distribution, I imagine.
We're at the point where it's like we don't get to control that part. I would say yes if anybody wants to help, but we hope it's well received. I'm thrilled. It was an incredible experience, and again, we talk about like team making as a film sport. Whenever the film comes out, I'm so thrilled people to see it because the folks that worked on this movie, the cast and the crew, are incredible, and I'm blown away at what they brought to this piece. And even the short film, like Night Session still probably had, I want to say, like 15, 20, 25 people that it took to still put something like this together. And yeah, it always very much takes a team.
And finally, I'll just ask you, and again, in this spirit of community, you can treat it like an Emmys acceptance speech if you like. Which relationships are the most important to you today?
Right today, I'd say my family. The short answer for that is definitely like my wife and kids. They're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, and also the people that make everything that I've been able to do in my career possible. In the idea that like my kids are the inspiration to like continue chasing my dreams. I wouldn't want to. It matters to me to chase your own dreams, but also to like embody that for my kids. That like you shouldn't be afraid to do that. You shouldn't hide your light under. Bushel? Was that the right phrase? And then my wife is just like the greatest supporter and champion that I've ever had. The fact that we were able to like, she's on board being like, yeah, let's take time to make this. And also I'll say this about the short or the feature. We shot that last April. This is April of 2025, and the reason I was able to like make that feature and continue working here at my day job at Colbert, because I wasn't able to get a leave for long enough to do a feature because we're still like a show that clocks all the time, is that we had a second kid and I used half of that parental leave to make that movie. And that was, God bless her a million times. It was my wife's idea. She was the one that was like, I think we should do it. I think we should do it now when the baby's basically like, a potato.
Wow. So thanks to the potato and the wife out there.
Thanks to the potato. The potato has a name. The children's names are Abigail and Rowan. My wife's name is Kelsey. They're all wonderful. They have the same last name as me. They're the greatest.
Thank you so much for that. I understand you'll have some free time, sadly, later this year.
Yeah. I'll have a lot of free time coming up in May. Coming at the end of May. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert is ending on May 21st. That's our last show for those that do not know.
But after that, the one positive takeaway is that maybe you'll be making more shorts, more features out there.
I hope so. I forgot to mention this on timing. So like we wrote Night Session. If my math is right, I think we wrote it in 2021, and then we sat on it for like a little while, and then and then maybe we might have sat on it for more than a year if my math's right. And then in 2023 we were like, you know what, let's make a thing. Like I gotta scratch that itch. I haven't made anything for a while. Let's do it. And then we ended up shooting the short. And then less than 24 hours, I want to say 12 hours after we wrapped the production for Night Session, the writers went on strike. And so, luckily, I feel incredibly lucky. I talk about like if I've got free time, I get itchy if I don't have something to work on. And I was like really, really lucky that like, oh, they're on strike for turned out to be 5 months, and like I was working on the short, and it was kind of great because like I wasn't rushed. If anything, I felt like people were like, oh man, like are people waiting on to see this short and it's taking so long? But nobody's waiting. Nobody will ever complain that like, oh, that terrible thing was done on time. Obviously, we all care about deadlines, and most of my career is about hitting very tight deadlines. But if you've got a creative project and a little bit of elbow room, and you can take the flexibility to take a little more time, it's grateful. It's great when you can.
Well, thank you for making the time today to
Thank you for having me. This has been really lovely. Warren, you did a great job. This has been a joy. I'm glad to chat with you.
Thank you. It was fantastic. For those who are watching this, you've already seen Night Session, and you probably saw it in the theater at the Majestic Bay. But tell your friends that you can still watch Night Session online as part of the Seattle Jewish Film Festival. You know where to find the festival online. You can do that. It'll be there for one more week, so check it out. Ballard C. Boyd, thank you so, so much. Thank you to your family as well for making things possible. And thank you to America's Everyman, Richard Kind.
American treasure, Richard Kind. The best.
Take care.